another board meeting of the students union, so he has asked his spokesperson to represent him in this meeting. So I will ask Rashid. Rashid was born in India, in Bihar, and he is a spokesperson for Abdi Aziz. So can you say a few words, please? Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Chairperson Marroof, and my fellow panelists, and dear ladies and gentlemen. I'm here on behalf of Abdi Aziz Suleiman. He's the union president of the University of Sheffield. And as I was introduced, I was born in India, so generally you would expect that I would have very mainstream thoughts, but I don't. I don't agree with the occupation of Kashmir by my country, which is India. That is because it's illegal, it's brutal. We occupy Kashmiri land using draconian laws such as AFSPA, which actually allows Indian military to kill anyone, even with an umbrella, if they think they have a weapon. So they can kill anyone, even if they are 6-year-old or 60-year-old. And that's one of the reasons why I don't agree with the occupation of Kashmir. But what actually is very mysterious is the way the global media fails to cover Kashmir. This is something, if we look at it statistically, over 80,000 people have been killed in Kashmir, which is more than Tibet and Palestine, yet we don't see any mention in the global media. Forget about the Indian media. That's just a tool of occupation. Indian media never says a thing against government of India, whether it's Kashmir or other issues. But what Kashmir has become is very suppressed. It's a great suppression story. You don't hear about it, which is why it's really good to have these kind of seminars outside India, where the people in UK or in America or in other powerful countries, they matter. Their opinion matters because your representatives would be speaking in British Parliament or in UN, where we need to talk about these issues. What we see in Kashmir is a very brutal occupation, but we don't know much about it. We do come across a few documentaries made by Western journalists, but more than that, we don't know much. Just last week, two respected human rights groups based in Kashmir have released a very long investigation conducted by them, in which basically they have named the members of Indian military who have killed people, who have been part of the occupation, who have exploited, tortured people of Kashmir. And they have analyzed 214 cases, and this is for the first time, 500 specific perpetrators, including 469 military, paramilitary, and police officials, beside 31 government-backed militants and associates have been named. And what we need to do is we need to take them to the International Court of Crime. They have done something that would never be punished by Indian judiciary. What we see in India is an architecture, an infrastructure built by Indian government that basically gives complete impunity to the military and its other collaborators to do whatever they want to do in Kashmir. So we need to do something outside India. And one important thing we need to do is that we need to hear the opinion of the Kashmiri people. Because historically, since 1947-48, what we have seen is, our general imagination has been occupied by two narratives, a narrative of India and a narrative of Pakistan. What we often ignore is the people of Kashmir. There's a third character entity involved in this conflict, which is people of Kashmir. So we need to listen to them, and what they want is, as they say, azadi, which is freedom, complete freedom. But where do we start from? How do we bring peace in Kashmir? What many people of the civil society of Kashmir and other few elements in India, within India, believe, is that we should withdraw Indian military, which is over 700,000 Indian soldiers in Kashmir Valley. You can actually see them everywhere, in colleges, hospitals, roads, gardens. Basically, a beautiful valley has been turned into an army barrack. You come outside, once you come out of the airport in Srinagar, what you see is unsmiling faces of Indian soldiers with their guns. It was supposed to be a beautiful land, but now all you see is gun and the Indian military. So we need to get rid of the Indian military unconditionally. That is the first thing that we want in Kashmir, in the bigger Kashmir, both Maqbooza Kashmir or Indian occupied Kashmir or Azad Kashmir, so that the people of Kashmir can have their say independent of other engaged entities, which is India and Pakistan. And of course, the withdrawal of the draconian laws from Kashmir and in general from the rest of the India as well. What we forget is that India is not just occupying or having draconian laws in Kashmir, but there are other part of the India as well, which is northeastern states, where we have the same laws, where Indian military can kill anybody if they wish. If they think somebody's walking with an umbrella or ice cream, if they think he's a terrorist or whoever they are, they can kill anybody. So Indian government is not just doing wrong things in Kashmir, but in other part of the India itself. As Arundhati Roy often says, India is at war with its own people. So we need to bring out these issues as well to have a very strong argument against the steps that India takes to occupy people that don't want to live within India. Also, one other important thing that we can do outside India or in the West is to engage with people within Kashmiri civil society who have very independent opinion or views and not the mainstream, which is very often the Indian narrative or the Pakistani narrative. The increasing number of people within Kashmir who have very pragmatic, very new ideas on how to solve this complete conflict. And I think they need a platform to speak about what they want to say. And of course, we need to talk about the media as well. It's very important that we, for example, BBC, it never talks about Kashmir. Even if it does, it has very benign, very, very good headline. They don't want to talk about Kashmir or India. As Arundhati again said, it's a good financial destination. Lots of investment goes from UK. We have, UK is one of the largest trade partner of India, so our MPs, MEPs, they need to talk about these things when they meet their colleagues in British Parliament. Very recently, UK has stopped its aid to India, but apart from that, we need to put conditions when we have increasing number of trade partnerships, especially in defense. UK supplies lots of arms to India, which is often used in the Kashmir Valley. So the tax money that the people of UK pays is in some way is responsible for killing of the Kashmiri people. So it needs to be very, of course, grassroots movement. So, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rashid. Professor Nazir is very interested to exchange the contact details before you can leave, and then we'll keep in touch with each other. Thank you very much. My next speaker is Maxine Bowler. Maxine Bowler is involved in the Kashmir issue since long time. We visited the earthquake area in Kashmir back in 2005. We went together and chose the charity to rebuild the girls' college in Bagh. She has played in that charity as a treasurer. So thank you very much, Maxine. Maxine also visited that area 3 times, I believe. And she went also with our Lord Mayor Jackie Drayton, who has chosen our charity for the Lord Mayor Charity Appeal. And she has opened the college. So we were all together during that time as well. So Julia Armstrong is not here. Julia Armstrong is also involved in the charity. She's also a journalist for the Sheffield Star. She was going to bring a film, but unfortunately we are unable to make any contact with her this afternoon, or possibly because of the bad weather or because of her work commitments. She gave commitment that she will be here, but unfortunately her phone is switched off, so we pray for her health and everything. So, but I will ask Maxine Bowler to give us a feedback because the Sheffield people have contributed towards the rebuilding the girls' college back in Kashmir. So people are still waiting some sort of feedback from that. College is up running and is going very well. Professor Assam is personally there to act as a principal of the college. But I will ask Maxine to say and brief us on the college issue, and if you want to say a few words on the Kashmir situation and the human rights violations, please. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, or good afternoon, as it is. I want to very much agree with what Barrister Tambo said, really, that we have to start to put more pressure about the question of Kashmir. A couple of months ago, my sister rang me up from London, and she said that she'd watched a programme on television which was about the appalling human rights violations taking place inside of Kashmir. And she said to me, Maxine, I understand for the first time why it is you are so concerned about what's going on in Kashmir and why it is you've gone there. And therein lies the problem, doesn't it? That actually it is the most brutal occupation that is taking place across the world, bar Palestine, and yet it is one that most people in this country know nothing about at all. We went out to Kashmir after the earthquake took place, and I'm really pleased that we have managed to build the girls' college in Kashmir. When we went there in April, it was the opening ceremony. As we drove along the bottom of the valley, we came there and we saw the building that we'd built on the top of the hill. And to be honest, I virtually wanted to cry, really, because it was just quite magnificent to see. And because actually it has taken a long while for us to build, and I suspect some people thought we would never actually get there and would never achieve it. And it is fantastic. And we were there for the opening ceremony, and loads of the children were there, and loads of the local people were there, and the Prime Minister of Azad Kashmir came and opened the college. So it's a fantastic achievement. But I want to say a bit about why we went there and why we did it. Obviously, there was a massive, devastating earthquake that took place in that region, so that was the reason. But actually, we went there because it was the time of the war on terror, the height of the war on terror. And actually, people didn't want to hear the voices of Muslims who desperately needed our help. And we said this is not good enough. It's not good enough that Muslims are just demonized. These people need our help. And that's one of the reasons why we went there. But the second reason we went there was because we felt that people of Kashmir had suffered too long. They had suffered this brutal occupation that had been taking place, and despite the fact that the United Nations had made a resolution to say that the people of Kashmir had the right to self-determination, that occupation has been going on since 1948 when the resolution was passed. And we felt that something had to be done. And so in one way, I'm hoping that really our school project, I think it stands as a sign of our solidarity, the solidarity between the people of Sheffield and the people of Kashmir. It's a symbol of that, really. But I'm hoping that also in the process of doing that, we started to raise the question of Kashmir. I mean, I think everybody who comes from Kashmir knows all the facts about how brutal the occupation is, but most other people don't. And it seems to me that actually, you know, this resolution was passed back in 1948, and nothing yet has been done about it. And really, part of the problem is economic interests. It's the British who created the problem in the first place. There's no doubt about it in my mind, and therefore the British have a responsibility, really, to do something about it. And I think that means that governments have to do something about it, and politicians have to do something about it. The truth is that in this country, our economic interests are allowing this occupation to continue. The fact that we're prepared to continue to deal arms to India, the fact that we see our interests being alongside of India is a problem, and that means that we have to start to do something about it. And that doesn't mean just, as I think you said, not just fine words. Fine words are great. We can all talk about it lots and lots of times. Actually, I believe we have to be campaigning around it. I believe we need to go out to the white community to say to the white community as well, this is an issue for you. If this can go on there, what kind of human rights can you expect in the future? And therefore, I believe that we very much have to campaign around it. I was actually looking at the film I saw on television. Actually was a very, very good film. The torture trail, yes. I think they said that 1 in 5 people who they'd interviewed had been tortured or brutalised by the Indian government. That is a shocking statistic. And I think it mentioned on the film Abu Ghraib. Actually, you know, we were horrified when we saw what had taken place in Abu Ghraib, when those things came up on our TV screens. But actually what is taking place in Kashmir, I think is far worse that has been taking place at Abu Ghraib. And that's why we have to start to stand up and say something. So I really sort of hope, I'm really sorry that Julia's not brought the film along. If people want to, there's a display outside and you can see the pictures of the completed college. And there's actually a website which is www.kashmir-relief, and you can see some of the images of the opening ceremony in the school. And I'm quite proud of what we've achieved, right? But actually that's not enough. We have to do much, much more. We have to end the occupation of Kashmir. I believe that the Kashmiri people have the right to self-determination and that we have to have more action around this, not just some fine words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maxine. My next speaker is a member of the European Parliament, Linda McEwan. Linda McEwan also very active in the human rights situations in different parts of the world, and we are grateful that she has also played such a wonderful role by keeping in touch with the community and the campaigners in Brussels. Linda kindly invited the Muslim community leaders in Brussels, and I was part of that delegation as well. So I saw Linda's work in Brussels, and Barrister Majid Trambo, who is the chairman of the Kashmir Center in Brussels, is also witness of the work. So I would ask Linda, please say a few words, or 5 minutes or more than 5 minutes we have, while our Member of Parliament Clive Betts is here. So what you have been doing and what you're intending to do in future by working very closely with the campaigners, Kashmir Center Brussels and Kashmir Center London, and we all will be campaigning for these atrocities and also the brutal occupation and also the human rights violations in Kashmir. So Linda McEwan, the Member of Parliament for European Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Move, and thank you for not only inviting me here today, seems to be feedback on the microphones, isn't there? But also for organising today's events. Maroof is a very active local councillor. I was very pleased when he got elected because it was a very tough election that he won, very tough. And he has stood many times. He's now a very active councillor. And organising today's events in the same week that we mark International Human Rights Day, and the number of people here and the calibre of speakers he's clearly been able to bring to Sheffield today is a tribute to his work in Sheffield as a councillor and his standing in the community. I think we had, if we look at we often have events where we talk about the problems in Kashmir and the issues in Kashmir, and we're hearing again about them. I think the key question that we have to try and build a consensus about now is what is the way forward? Because we had an event in the Socialist Group of the European Parliament a few months ago looking at the whole question of Kashmir and looking at the nature of the problem. But to be very honest with you, I didn't think we defined a way forward. And I think what we as politicians are looking for now is some way, because obviously for there to be any peaceful solution, Pakistan and India have to have a dialogue of some kind, because these are the two countries where there is an issue. The international community has to put it further at the top of its agenda, and it's very true what Maxine said. If you look at in recent times, other issues have overtaken the issue of Kashmir in the international community, and we have failed to make it an issue where people feel there's any sense of urgency. And so we go to meetings like this, and we say it's been since 1948, and we say, we know, we've seen evidence, we've seen the films, and we know we've taken witnesses that there are appalling human rights abuses, but we don't seem to have a strategy to get it higher in the international community's agenda, or to get the two sides talking and to find a solution. And we know from other experiences of international peacekeeping, we know from Northern Ireland, that the only way to resolve problems like this is to get two sides talking to each other. And I suppose it's what is in the interest of those two governments as well. Why should they talk about it? And that's where, I'm sorry I wasn't able to come, I had earlier commitments today, is how can we to get the sides talking, to get the international community to take it seriously. In the European Union, it's the governments of the European Union who lead on foreign policy. If you read in our national press, they say, oh, the EU is all powerful, it does this, it does that. But of course, in the area of foreign policy, the EU does do work together on foreign policy, but it's driven by the governments of the European Union. And not enough of those governments see Kashmir as an issue which they attach a great deal of importance to. And I think it's been said already, economic relationships tend to dominate. We do have a policy that in our international trade agreements there should be progress on human rights, but they're always nuanced. And people always say, we have the same issue with China, with India, and with other parts of the world. People always say, yes, but we try and get them to improve the human rights. But ultimately, it's the argument about positive engagement versus not being engaged at all. So I think what would be helpful to us is to have a strategy, a way forward, to listen to your voices, to hear how we can, because I know there are different views as well about the future of Kashmir. We know that there are different views about whether it should be part of Pakistan, independent, etc. Where we should go, how we can, where the willingness inside to get the talks moving are, and to find some pressure there, because the EU governments themselves cannot resolve the problem unless there's willingness to talk on the ground. And seems to be the issue that's been missing from a lot of the debates we've had in the European Parliament, where we pass resolutions talking about human rights issues, we have events, initiatives, but we don't get it on the top of the agenda. So we don't make a plan of action to move the issue forward, and that is what is needed in the near future. Many of you have family in Kashmir, you know how long this has been going on, for generations and generations. It's been going on as long as the Palestinian crisis, and we still don't have a solution. So maybe not for me to say, because it would be wrong of me to pretend we have made enormous progress in the European Union, because the fact we're here again talking about human rights shows that the abuses continue, that we have our reports, that we don't actually make that crucial breakthrough. At the moment we have a High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Cathy Ashton, who is a Labour politician, and I know that she is concerned about Kashmir. But again, it's because it's the governments, the foreign secretaries of the countries who determine what she prioritises. They are not saying to her, this is a priority for us to talk about. So I know you have experts here. Maybe that would be something for, if you have a plan of action after today, to have a strategy for the future. How do we raise the profile? What have we done already? What has already been done diplomatically? What worked, what didn't work, and how can we have a strategy for moving things forward? So if you have another meeting like this in a year's time, we can have a kind of plan of action to resolve the issue. And so I hope that we can make some progress. I look to you, who are far more expert than I am in this part of the world, to give us some ideas for how we might move that forward. And again, just to say thank you, Marroof, for organising today. Thank you for people coming from Brussels, from Oxford, from across our region as well, to be here. And we will do what we can, but we also need your help to have a clear strategy to get this issue on the agenda and moving forward.
And we are still waiting for reply bets soon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry, I missed you. So without any further delay, we are doing very well. And I will ask Cllr Mohammad. Cllr Mohammad is MP for Sheffield South East, and he used to be leader of this council. And today he is with us. And his constituency is where most Kashmiri and Pakistani people lives, and he is a true advocate for their community on these issues. So I will ask Clive Betts to say a few words on these ones. And thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you, Clive.
Thank you, Marroof. You can see when I was here sitting on these benches as leader of the council some time ago, we didn't have these contraptions. We just had to shout fairly loudly to get ourselves heard above the rumpus that was often going on in the council chamber. But I'm pleased everyone is well behaved here today, and thank you very much for organising the conference and for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me say at the beginning, I haven't got an instant solution to this problem. If I had, I probably wouldn't still be an ordinary member of Parliament. I'd be doing something much more important somewhere. And I just heard Linda's comments at the end there about how difficult it is to solve this problem and many others like it around the world, where there are disputes about territories and governance and seemingly no easy solutions to them, only strife and stress and discord. I suppose, like most of the other disputes that we could talk about, we should never have got into them in the first place, should we? We all know the history of how Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir was created, and the dispute about whether the agreement was signed before the troops moved in or the troops moved in before the agreement was signed. And unfortunately, it's like that. And having that sort of argument about what happened all those years ago isn't going to produce a solution. It merely makes each side feel that right is on their side rather than the other side, and that doesn't help to a resolution. And for a long time, the argument about the status of Kashmir and where it should belong was a bit like simply a tug of war. India was saying, no, it's ours, and Pakistan was saying, no, it's ours. And somehow the rights and interests of the people who actually live there were lost in this argument. And I think that is one of the problems. For a long time it was seen as a territorial dispute between two countries rather than an issue of the human rights of the people who lived in Kashmir. And that, I think, is what eventually we began to turn the argument round towards. And I also have to say that that tug of war that went on was also not terribly helpful to a proper resolution. And it's something I'll say a little bit about again in a minute, because to an extent, India always had a bit of an upper hand in that argument. And I'll say something a little bit controversial here, because India was increasingly seen as a stable, democratic country which was reasonably to be relied upon. And Pakistan was seen as a country which was unstable, had a series of military coups and dictators, fallouts between political leaders, assassinations of political leaders, though India obviously had those as well, and a country which really was struggling with itself, not one that you could really say deserved to take over somewhere else that India was claiming as well. And I think that always led to a situation where, to an extent, Pakistan was on the back foot in that tug of war that took place. I think it was therefore helpful, hasn't moved as much further forward de facto, but in terms of the rights and wrongs of the argument, when the argument began to be turned round into, but what about the views of the people who live in Kashmir? What about their rights? Ultimately, haven't they got a right to decide where they belong? And I think that is the only rational position to take. It is about an argument for a referendum, for the people themselves to decide. Do they want to be part of India? Do they want to be part of Pakistan? Or do they want to be independent in their own country? Now, from talking to people, I think there is a lot of argument in favour of that, a lot of feeling in Kashmir. But it has to be both parts of Kashmir, I think, who are allowed to make that choice. And Pakistan has to allow that as well as India. And that, I think, is the position we ought to try and argue for and work towards. I'm not, however, going to be very optimistic that's going to happen anytime soon. One of the fundamental problems is that instinctively, when we argue about these matters, there is a feeling that if all we're saying is give people a choice, give people a chance to have a choice, then it'll all be all right. But the difficulty is, in the end, where is that pressure going to come from? Well, I suppose you might say it's the United Nations, isn't it? But then you start to look at what the United Nations is. It's, of course, a body of member states. all of whom who have their own boundaries, all of whom want to protect the integrity of their boundaries, and therefore don't want to set precedents by allowing other countries to be allowed to be fragmented, as they would see it. There are countries in the United Nations who have elements within them who would like their referendum about the possibility of seceding in some way, or federating, or certainly coming to a different arrangements. We can already see, I mean, all right, we've got Scotland, we're saying to Scotland have the referendum, but you can see in Catalonia, even in an advanced Western democracy, the tensions about allowing Catalonia to have a choice in that matter.